Okay, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Bob Wicklein, and I'm a member here at Faith Presbyterian, and that's it. I don't have any other credentials. I'm not with the Navigators. I'm not on staff with the church, but I have been engaging with men in discipleship for about close to 50 years. And so I'm going to try to impart something tonight that I think is really important. Of people, that they would see a need and a desire and want to get serious about going and making disciples. And I'm hoping that God is doing that with you right now. But we have talked this afternoon, that Nathan has talked about what a disciple is. He said a disciple is a learner. And he said discipleship is when one follows someone else to learn from them so they can go and imitate them. He talked about the Great Commission containing one imperative, and it's to make disciples. He talked about that we're all called to make disciples, not just some of us, not just the professionals within our group, but all of us common, broken people. We talked about that we can be used by God to make disciples because God is making us sufficient. Not because we're special and have capabilities, but God is doing something in our lives. Doug talked about that God's plan to use common people to do his work in restoring broken people. Well, those are all great things, and I'm going to try to help us to look at this in a little bit different way, hopefully, but I think the really important way, and it's titled Vision and Cost, Thinking Through the Essence of Disciple Making. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I became a Christian in 1971 when I was in the military, and actually through the Navigators, and I've had a long history with the Navigators in my life. They're a valuable and very strong group that has a true vision for going and making disciples. And when I became a Christian, I was quickly introduced to the concept of disciple making. In fact, I would almost say it was too quickly, because I went from becoming a brand new believer, and men helped me grow up in my faith through initial meetings, but very quickly moved me from a new believer into learning about the techniques, skills, and methods of going in and making disciples. And that's good. But in the long run, it had a stunting effect on me. And I'll tell you why. I learned techniques, I learned methods, I learned skills, but I hadn't taken the time to think about this and get the vision that God wanted me to have about people and about discipleship in general. So we have to ask the question. I said that we're going to talk about vision and cost, two different things, but the first one is vision. What's this vision that we're talking about? Vision has to do, I think, with two primary constructs, and that is heart and context. The heart and then the context. We're going to talk about each one of those here. The heart focuses on calling us as disciples on how to inspire and pass this on to other people. In Matthew, we've already heard tonight Matthew 28:18 through 20. You know, it actually starts in verse 16 when you think about it. Jesus told his disciples after he had been crucified and come back alive, he told his disciples, "Hey, meet me back up in Galilee." You know the place, up on the mountain. They did. So they walked from Jerusalem to the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee near Capernaum and probably met Jesus up there somewhere. And when they met him there, he said, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe," or teaching them to obey, "all that I've commanded you." And then he ends with, and he says, "I'm with you to the very end of the age." So the heart focuses on how a disciple can inspire and pass on this vision, this purpose, this desire to follow Jesus to somebody else. And in meeting with guys in discipleship for the 50 years, I can't believe it's been that long, but 50 years, what I found is the sticking point is this. I meet with a guy in discipleship and I tell them the goal of discipleship is not what we are doing here, not what we're doing in this room, sitting together, discussing these issues. The goal of discipleship, or success in discipleship, is what you do with somebody else. And really, what that somebody else then does with another somebody else. It's back to the scripture that Nathan shared in 2 Timothy 2:2, where Paul told Timothy, "Go find some faithful guys, teach them what I taught you, so they can go and find some more faithful guys and do the same thing." And the sticking point has always been in that third generation and that fourth generation, being able to pass that on. And that's what I really want to try to get at tonight, is looking at the heart of what it means to go and make disciples and getting that heart to make disciples. Too quickly, like myself, we can be, maybe even right now, you're saying, "Hey, I want to do this. I really want to engage in making disciples." How do you do that? Tell me how to do that. I've heard that from people. And I want to say, well, we'll talk about that, but I think something that's more important than just learning about skills and methods and techniques. Let's talk about getting a real heart and a real vision for this. All right, so we're going to talk about heart. We're going to talk about context. Context addresses how the logistics, how you do this, where you do this, and what do you do when you're actually making disciples. So vision is dealing with heart and context. And I like to put it this way: heart construct is the most important and the most difficult to accomplish. And why I say it's the most difficult to accomplish is because I can't do that. I can't give a person a heart for discipleship. Just like Doug was sharing with us, it's God who makes us sufficient. I can't give a person a heart. Nathan can't do that. None of us can. But only God can. But God wants to use me, wants to use you in that process. And that's cool on a whole bunch of different points. Let's talk about that. Planting, our job is to plant a heart for discipleship. So think about this. Farmers plant, right? When the farmers go out and plant seeds in the soil, that's what they do. They plant their seeds, some of the seeds in the soil. And they work hard to do that. You know, they have to put them in straight lines. I'm from Illinois. I've seen lots of cornfields and bean fields. They have to put them in the right lines, because later on they're going to come back and cultivate this and spray them with fertilizers and insecticides and things like that. But they plant the seeds in the ground, and then after they're done, they step back off their tractor and they say, "Grow!" And the plants just start to spring out of the ground, and that's how it works. It doesn't work that way, right? They plant the seeds, they work hard in that process, but God, there again, God's the one who enables the plants to grow up and thrive and prosper, and He provides the rain and all the things that are needed for the plants to grow up. So when we're planting, that's our job. We're planting. We get to be a part of the process. The heart for disciple making, I think, revolves around 4 different constructs, and that's value, truth, belief, and motivation. So if I'm planting a heart for discipleship, or trying to be a part of planting a heart for discipleship, I want to help a person get to understand and see the value in this. And to answer the question, is this really important? I mean, really, is it important enough for me to take my time? Is it important enough for you to take your time to do this? And you have to answer that question. Truth. Is this what the Bible is saying, or is this what it's meaning? So we not only need to know the value of something, but we need to know, is this really true? Is this what Scripture is telling us to do? Or is this just something that's a good idea that churches and navigators and other organizations come up with? Belief. Do I really believe that God wants me to do this? Not that it should be done, but that I need to be involved in this process. And then the last one is motivation. Am I inspired to act on what I say I value and I believe? So I can't just say that I value it and I think it's true and I really believe it and then not do anything about it. I have to actually act on what I say I believe. So that's the heart. Now we're going to talk about context. The context for discipleship. And this deals with some of the logistics. How is God leading and directing you to make disciples? We've got Doug Luby over here with the Navigator. He's doing this full time. This is what he does for a living. He gets paid for doing this. Nathan Parker is a pastor. He gets paid for doing that. We all know about full-time Christian workers, part-time Christian workers, or maybe some other proportion. Some of us may be called into a ministry, may be called to go on staff with the Navigators or other organizations. But I want us to think a little differently about this. A couple weeks ago in Sunday school, my friend Chip Pettigrew made a really, I think, profound statement. He said something like this. We are all full-time ministers. We just are doing it in a different context. Chip was a physician, so he was full-time in ministry. He just happened to be doing it as a physician. I was a university professor. I just happened to be doing it at the University of Georgia. And if you're a mother, you could be full-time as a mother. And you're involved in the ministry of making disciples within that context. So I want us to get past the concept of, should I do this full-time, like I get paid for this? But think of full-time from the standpoint of, we're all called to this in a full-time basis. We just happen to be doing it in the context of our careers, of our raising our children, or whatever. Where will you primarily engage in making disciples? Now, I think that's important because if we don't think about that, we sort of lose sight and we don't pay attention. I think that's how I'd put it anyway. When I was in the Navy, and became a Christian, and then got involved with the Navigator ministry in discipleship, my context was with sailors and Marines on the base and on the ships that I was on. And so I didn't have to say, well, man, where am I going to find the men that I can begin to engage with? They were right there. That's my context. When I got out of the Navy and I went to college, the campus was my context. But something happened, or at least something happened to me, when I got out of the Navy. The Navy, I dealt with sailors and Marines, and for the most part, they were guys who, you could kind of say, in general, they didn't know the Lord and they needed to hear the gospel. And you wouldn't be too off if you had that mentality with those guys. They were rough, they were crude, their language was not very good, but that's the context that I was working in. When I went to college, and my context was now with students in a college, you could also have the same position, that there was probably a good percentage of those that just needed to hear the gospel. And that's where I began. That's where I began in the discipleship, is with sharing the gospel with people and then helping them to grow from there. The only difference is that they just weren't as crude as they were in the military. But they had pretty much the same needs there. But when I moved from the college to finish with the university, going to my first job, whoa, the context got real fuzzy. I was trying to segregate my life into, well, I'm doing ministry, and that's here, and then I'm doing my job, that's over here, and then I've got some social activities I'm doing over here, and they were all so separated out. And it was difficult, and I think it's difficult for lots of us, especially us who are grown up and we're working in a job, to try to figure out, well, what is my context? Where am I going to be engaging people in discipleship? Is it at work? Is it on campus? Is it in my neighborhood? Is it on a military base? Or is it church? Now, here's something that I thought was interesting. I always thought, well, there's not a real need to be involved in discipleship within the church, because it's the church. And, people are growing in their faith and participating in the different church activities and programs. Discipleship's probably already well developed within the church. What I've come to find out is just the opposite. Nathan, you mentioned that earlier on, that the church has been very ineffective in discipleship. And so there's this huge area of the local church to engage in discipleship, helping men and women get a heart and a vision to give themselves away. And so for me, my context is in the local church in discipleship. That's where I'm primarily meeting men that I'm involved in discipleship. I'm also a woodworker, and so I'm part of the Athens Area Woodworkers Guild, and so I meet men in that capacity. Those are my two primary contexts. It used to be the gym, but we quit the gym because of COVID. But think about where your context is, where you're going to be meeting people, and let that kind of guide you and get your radar operating with regard to how you can begin to introduce biblical, scriptural, faith-based issues with the people that are around you. Okay, so another thing is, what are the limitations on how you're going to engage in making disciples? I just throw three things down here. If you're young in your career, you're just getting started, you may have very limited time. If you're young in your career, it might be that you're also very young in your family. You've got young kids, and you've got all kinds of things that are pulling and stretching on you, and you just don't have a lot of time. So how you engage in discipleship there is going to look very different than maybe if you're more senior in your career and you've got more flexibility with your time. For me, when I was a young professor, just having one guy that I could be investing in and helping them to grow up in their faith so that they could go in and do the same with somebody else I was maxed out at that. As I got more seasoned in my job as a university professor, I found out that I had more time, and so I could meet with more guys. And what's cool about it is that when I'm retired, like what I am right now, I've got all kinds of time. I don't have to go to a job. I'm not, I don't have young children that are needing me for different things. I can meet with all kinds of guys, and so I meet with several men each week. So what's your limitations? And think about that, because we're all called to go in and make disciples. It doesn't mean we have to have 15 people that we're meeting with. One person is where you can start. And then lastly, what types of people will you most probably be discipling? You might find out that they're all kind of similar to your own age. But then again, they might not be. I'm currently meeting with a man who's in his 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, 2 or 3 in their 30s. And I've had, over the years, a whole bunch of them that are in their 20s because they were university students. So what's the age? What's the stage? What's the physical, spiritual, and the mental backgrounds or needs of the folks? Just having that in your mind. So understanding the context is really important. So I'm keeping my eyes open here at Faith Presbyterian Church. If you see me come up and talk with you, it might be because I want to talk with you about, hey, would you might be interested in learning what disciple making is, and going from there. Now, I'm going to do that with men. I'm not. There's another point in my context. I'm not doing that with women, and I'd make that a strong suggestion for everybody there. Okay. Some common problems in this. I just wrote down a few of these things to say. One of them is, I don't have a vision. I don't know, I don't believe, or I don't value the great missions making disciples. If you find yourself in that camp, you're not alone. There's lots of believers that are at that point. So if you don't have a vision, one of the things you need to do is begin to allow God to give you that vision, that heart for people, and in making disciples. Another one might be, my vision for disciple making is not working. My efforts in discipleship just don't seem to be working. My men aren't passing it on. Remember, I told you it's that oftentimes that third generation or that fourth generation. And so that's where, as you meet with a person in discipleship, one of the things that I like to do with the guys I meet with as they are meeting with other guys is to ask them questions like, how's that going? What are you doing? How's that working? I got to give a compliment. There's a guy sitting right over here. His name's Mark Badoon. He's 64 years old. At one time, he was the oldest guy I'd ever discipled. Mark is an incredibly teachable person. And as Mark started meeting with the first guy that he was discipling, he would come, when we met together, when Mark and I met on a weekly basis, he would say, hey, Bob, I'm doing this. What do you think about this? He would initiate this with me, which was great. I call him my poster child for this ability to critique and evaluate. And he's always been open to hearing it. And that's wonderful. Sometimes you don't get that, and you have to literally take the initiative and ask people, what are you doing? How are you doing? How's that working out? And that's important. If we just assume that everything's going fine, we'll oftentimes see that where things start to break down at the third generation. Another one is I don't have or I don't know what my context is for making disciples. You have lots of things that are possibilities. You have your neighborhood. You have your work, your wherever you're working. You have, if you're a student, you have your fellow students. If you're have some kind of activity you're doing with, like I'm doing woodworking, there's another possibility. And then of course there's the local church. Just tremendous needs out there. But we have to keep our eyes open and look for opportunities to meet with people. All right, so that's dealing with the heart and the context. The next thing is cost. What do you mean, cost? What's this going to cost me? It's going to cost you, okay? You can't engage in discipleship without it costing you. Eugene Peterson, the guy who wrote the book, wrote the paraphrase Bible, The Message, you may be familiar with, defined discipleship as he says, long obedience in the same direction. It takes time. I think what he's saying, it takes time, it can be difficult, and it needs to be focused. Here's my definition for disciple making, and I said, developing a heart, mind, and skills to give yourself away. Developing a heart, mind, and skills to give yourself away. I say this is counterintuitive and countercultural. It's just not the way people, most people think. They don't think of like, what can I do to spend time with somebody else to try to help them, unless there's something in it for me. That's what our culture teaches. So when we do this, when God gives you that vision and that heart, it's almost indicative of a changed mind, a changed mentality, a changed way of thinking about life. Discipleship's going to cost you. It's going to cost time, energy, personal resource, some of your personal, not all of it, but some of your personal resources, patience, and your emotions. I don't know how many men I've met with over the years in discipleship. There have been men that I've given my time and my heart to, and then something happens and they walk away. It might be something related to their own personal life, but my point is that it's hard when somebody steps away and says, I don't want to do this anymore. And that plays on your emotions. And you're going to deal with stuff with people that are going to do it, and then you have to do it again and do it again, and you're going to ask yourself, man, why don't you get this? And it's patience building. It costs you something, literally, out of your pocket. It costs you stuff. It's not going to break your bank, I don't think, but it's going to cost you. Be aware it's going to cost you something. But the biggest thing is your time. It takes time to build a heart, a mind, and the skills to engage with people in discipleship. Unless you're willing to give the time, it's going to be very frustrating to you. I meet with guys, just to give you a perspective, I meet with guys one at a time. One person at a time. So I meet with guys every week, and or at least we try to. We do, there's always something coming up, like holidays and things like that. I don't want to present that I'm some kind of hard-nosed and we never take any time off. But I try to be consistent in meeting with guys one at a time, purposefully. It's not an efficient model, but I think it's a very effective model. When I meet with a guy one-on-one, I pay attention to that person. We're dealing with his life, his issues. I don't have to divide my time with anyone else. And each guy that I meet with, I meet for at least 2 hours. And so right now I'm meeting with 6 guys. And so you take 6 times 2, that's 12 hours a week that I'm meeting just with them, and then it takes time to get prepared for each of those. Why am I telling you? I'm not trying to tell you to scare you off. I'm trying to say this is what it takes. I'm telling you, it's counterintuitive. It's countercultural. This is not the way Americans think about the use of their time. It's a non-renewable resource. But it's valuable. Now, it might sound like, wow, man, that sounds like, what do you get out of this? Nothing? Is it just you're so altruistic that you're just willing to do this? The answer is obviously no. I'm nowhere close to that. What I get from this, and what you can get from this as you engage with people, men and women in discipleship, is you get to play a part in doing the will of God. And you get to see God doing supernatural works in the lives of people. And I can't tell you, that's joyful. When I see a man come to a point saying, yeah, I really want to do this. Help me to do this. It's joyful. That's all I can say. I married Betsy 40 years, a little over 40 years ago, and we got married. It was a joyful day. It was a great day. I have 3 daughters. When they were born, it was a joyful days. But I'm telling you, when I meet with a guy and they get a heart and begin to get the vision for going and making disciples, that's the joy of the Lord. And you don't get that anywhere else. And so there's something that motivates a person to do this because it's from God. And we get to participate in a supernatural work from God. I think that's cool. I hope you do too. Okay, I want us to look at some scripture. What's Jesus have to say pertaining to the concepts of serving, sacrifice, and paying the cost? So let's just look at these 3 passages. If you will, let's look at this first one, Mark 8:34. Jesus says, "And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, 'If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me.'" What's that saying? Hey, if you want to follow me, it's going to be easy peasy. Just get on board the train, and we'll have a great time. Tell me. This is interactive. You can talk here. Nobody? It's painful. It can be. You're denying yourself. You're taking up a cross, which is an instrument of death, and you're following Christ. So it can be difficult. It's not going to be easy. Look at the second one. I love this one. "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I remember in reading this the first time, I thought, I'm a Christian, I'm trying to walk with God. Oh boy, I get to carry a yoke. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm saying that facetiously. Do you pick up on that? Okay. But I've since looked at this in a whole different light. Jesus is saying, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy burden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke and learn from me. Now, everybody know what a yoke is? Okay? A yoke's this thing that you put on animal that helps to pull the plow or whatever. In the Bible, they talk about oxen, yoke of oxen. Now, I know you can have one oxen in one yoke, and that's how you can do that. But I want us to envision, a word picture here, to envision two oxen in a yoke. Okay, so it's got two places for the heads of the animals to go in that connects to the plow. But we're not going to think about oxens anymore. We're going to think of oxes. Oxens? We're not going to think about oxen anymore. We're going to think about people. And Jesus is saying, come to me if you who are labor and are heavy laden, and get rest. Take my yoke upon me and learn from me. So our goal is to put our heads into the yoke. But remember, it's got two holes, two places to put a yoke. Who's in the other yoke? Who? Christ. Yeah, Jesus is. So as I'm in the yoke, number one, I get to be in the yoke with Jesus. And number two, when I'm in the yoke and he says, okay, let's plow, let's pull. And I make an effort. Who am I looking at? Who's looking at me when we're doing this? Jesus is. I get to be with Jesus in the yoke, and we're plowing together. He says, come on, Bob. Let's go for it. Let's do it. That's inspiring to me. Luke 14:25-26. Now a great crowd. This is a tough one. Now a great crowds accompanied him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes after me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciples. Whoa, that's a heavy one, isn't it? Does Jesus really want us to hate our mothers and our fathers and our wives and our children? I don't think he's really talking about, go out and start hating your wives. What he's saying is don't let anything get between you and me. I want you to be a follower of me. I want you to come along and get in the yoke with me. Don't let anything get in the way. What do you think the number one reason is why men say they can't be involved in discipleship? You want to guess?
Busy. Don't have enough time.
Yeah, time, busy. I'm too busy, okay? What about the number one reason women say they can't be involved in discipleship? They say something a little bit different. You might want to guess? Betsy's already said it, but she doesn't get the... Demand about what? What'd you say? Family, okay? They'll say their family, their children. So men will say they're busy with their careers, their work. Women, or a lot of women will say, I'm just too busy with my family, with my children. We're talking about a relationship between a person and God. And then what God's going to do with that person in doing His will, doing His mission. Part of it is we can't even let those excuses get in our way. Going back to my friend Chip Pettigrew's comment is we all need to be 100% in ministry. We just do it in different contexts. It might be with your family. It might be as you're a professor or a physician or whatever. Okay, let me look at our time. Yeah, we're going to wrap this up here. So what have we learned? Well, Jesus regularly challenged his disciples to serve and sacrifice as they lived their lives of faith and trust in God. He warned his disciples that there was going to be a high cost. And he said this path is going to be dangerous. There'll be many efforts to derail them from staying on this path. Jesus said his yoke was going to provide rest for their souls, even though they were going to have their head in the yoke and they'd be pulling the plow. Or you got the picture, right? They weren't going to just stand there with a yoke around their neck. They were going to be engaged in going and making disciples. And then Jesus warns us the cost of disciple making is high. It can be wearing on us. If you're engaged in discipleship, I guarantee you will become weary. But it's a really, really good weary. Because you're going to be doing the will of God. Nathan Pettigrew, because I know you got a really strong voice. If you will please look up 1 John chapter 2. And I want you to, we've all heard this passage before. It talks about don't love the world or the things that are in the world. For all that's in the world, the love, the desires, I almost went to King James there. The desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life is not from the Father but from the world. Now I want, Nathan, if you'll... No, I want you to take on after that. What does it say after that? Keep going, just a few verses.
The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever.
All right, say that last thing again, please.
The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever.
Doing the will of God. It says we're going to live forever. I'm 70 years old. Just, hey, we all can count numbers here. Yeah. But the numbers of years or days that I have might be in minutes, seconds, or the bottom line, let's be real. I've had more years behind me than I do in front of me. Okay? That's just the reality of that. But according to Scripture, if we're doing the will of God, we live forever. The Apostle Paul went and made disciples. Some of us in here, maybe, are the offspring, the great-grandchildren of Paul. And that's the reality of what the Scripture is saying. My wife's a counselor. She says that there's two primary things that people, Betsy's going to have to help me out if I screw this up, all right? Two primary things that people want. They want to, what are they again?
They want to remember.
Okay, yeah, that's it. She said they want to be significant. They want to have meaning and purpose in their life, and they want to have some kind of security. They want to have peace in their life. They want to be significant. They say, my life's meaningful. It's purposeful. I do this with guys. I'm 70 years old. I'm 5 foot nothing. I'm overweight. But I'm going to change the world. I'm not Jeff Bezos. I'm not John Glenn or Chuck Yeager or some other guns, the ones that you guys are going to know. I'm not Steve Jobs. I'm none of those people. I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. I'll never be that way, and I'll never create any of those things. But after those dudes die, if they're not in the Lord, doing the will of God, they will be forgotten. But we, me, you, can go on forever. Our impact, as I invest in David Staten and Mark Badoon and Chuck Fortenberry over here, these are guys that are then passing this on. And once I'm gone, they're still doing that. And then the guys that they're meeting with are still doing that multiplication process. That's phenomenal. You want to change the world? You can do it. I can do it. This little dweeb can do it. So it's really cool. Conclusions. Having a vision for disciple making is essential. Without a vision, we lose heart and we quit. You mean if you're like me and you learned a bunch of techniques, skills, and methods and were weak in the vision, it almost killed my efforts, my ministry, my vision, my heart for going and making discipleship. We have to have that. It's essential. So don't try to, when I work with guys, I spend between 6 to 10 months, sometimes longer, just in getting vision. I'm planting, and I'm praying that God's going to give a person that heart, that vision. And when that happens, I get to be there and see that, and that's wonderful. Some of my best days are these. This was, I think it was this past summer. I got a phone call on a Friday night with the family, and this guy, his name is, I didn't disciple him. One of the guys that I discipled this dude, Mitchell Lamb. Okay? So, do you know Mitchell? Yeah. Okay. Mitchell Lamb called me up, and he said, "Hey, Bob, I just want to let you know." Now, Mitchell was discipled by Ben Bonson. Ben Bonson, I built into Ben. Ben built into Mitchell. Mitchell calls me up and said, "Hey, Bob, I just want to let you know, I'm meeting with the guy right now." And he told me his name, which I can't remember. But the point is, whoa, that was a wonderful, wonderful evening. Just hearing that little word. And we talked a little bit about that, and I tried to encourage him, and that's great. Doug talked about Mark Flaggy. Remember Mark Flaggy, the guy who went back to live on the farm and help his brother? Small world. I got to disciple Mark Flaggy's son, Andy Flaggy. Isn't that something? And Andy Flaggy now is in Birmingham, Alabama, and he's engaging with the guys in discipleship. So it's totally cool. Having a vision is essential. Without it, we're going to quit. You will quit, no matter how disciplined you are, no matter how dedicated you are, you'll quit. Why? Because skills and techniques and methods won't do it for you. You'll have things will happen with the people that you invest in, and sometimes it's disappointing, and you quit. It's hard. It takes a long time. A heart for disciple making should come first before discipleship skills, and only can be given and sustained by God. And it's supernatural. And you get to be a part of that. To be a part supernatural work of God. You don't get that if you were the creator of Amazon, like Jeff Bezos was. Okay? Knowing your context for disciple making will help guide and focus your discipleship efforts. So where's your context? What is it? Where are you going to focus your efforts? And then lastly, there's a significant cost associated with disciple making, and but God's going to provide. God will provide you. I want to end by everybody know what this picture is? The White House. Okay, the White House. So, I've just talked to you about discipleship, so now I'm going to go just a little bit and talk about politics. Nah, I'm not going to do that. But I am going to talk about the White House, okay? But it's not the White House that you see in this picture. In 1978, I was living in Birmingham, Alabama. The guy who was discipling me at that time. By the way, we all need to have a person we're discipling. That's called a Timothy, and a guy who's building into us. That's called a Paul. So, where's your Timothy? Where's your Paul? So the guy that was building into me back then was a guy named Jim Robinson. He had just gone on staff with the Navigators. And the Navs were doing something really interesting at that time. They were sending, or at least allowing, brand new staff to go up to Michigan State University during the summer to get special training by a very seasoned Navigator staff guy up there. And so Jim went up to I think it's East Lansing, where Michigan State is. And then when he came back at the end of the summer, he was telling me about what he did. And wow, there were some phenomenal things that they did. And I remember thinking, man, I'd like to do that. I'd really like to do that. Be cool if I could get to do that. But I never went on staff with the Navigators, so I never got to go up there. Here's the White House part. The guy who's the trainer up there, the seasoned veteran, his name was Larry Whitehouse. Larry Whitehouse, that was his name, okay? And so that was in 1978. Betsy and I moved here to Athens, starting as a professor in 1991. About 1993 or 4, I got a phone call. And hello, that's when we had, landlines and you actually answered the phone when it rang. I said, hello, and the guy said, hi, is this Bob Wicklein? Yeah. Well, this is Larry Whitehouse. He says, I've just recently moved to the Athens area and was wondering if we could get together for a cup of coffee. And I said, well, okay. And so we got together for a cup of coffee. Now, Larry's a whole lot older now, okay? In fact, he was at a point in time with driving where he's getting pretty unsafe, and there was one occasion with the car and a train, and that was the end of Larry's driving. And so his wife said, you can't drive anymore. So I used to go and pick him up quickly. I want to tell this story, and we'll quit. And I got to meet with Larry for many years. And as Larry got older, he got more infirmed. He had kidney problems. His kidneys failed. He went on dialysis. He got a kidney transplant. Bottom line is we had some great times together in discipleship, but Larry died. And at Larry's funeral, and here's my point, and I'm going to make this thing without tearing up, okay? At Larry's funeral, Betsy and I attended, and our former pastor was doing the services. He does his part. He asked, is there anybody would like to say anything about their relationship with Larry? And so there were many people who got up and spoke that day. I was one of them. But this wasn't what I said. It's what some guy across the... David, were you there? It was a guy who was across the chapel. And a guy stood up, and he said, he told his name. I don't remember his name. He said, I drove from, I'm from someplace in Indiana, and I drove here for Larry's funeral. And I thought, wow, you must have really known Larry. He's significant in your life. And then the next thing he said, I'm from Indiana, and I've never met Larry Whitehouse. And I was like, wow, you're a strange guy who goes to funerals, in other states, a meeting guy. But then he held up a picture. It was a black and white picture. It had 4 people in the picture. He says, this guy over here on this side, that's Larry. He's a lot younger there, but that's Larry. And the guy next to him is the guy that Larry discipled. And the guy next to that guy is the guy that guy discipled. And that third guy, he's the one who discipled that fourth guy. So there are 4 guys in the picture. He says, I'm not in this picture. I never met Larry. He says, but that fourth guy, he's the guy that discipled me. My chin just hit the floor. This man understood the vision of what it means of a person that's willing to give themselves away. And he drove all the way from Indiana to attend this man's funeral. It was impactful to me. Larry Whitehouse had an impact on him, and he didn't even know him. And that's what we can have. So, developing a heart, developing a vision, understanding what it's going to cost, and getting in that yoke and saying, help me, Jesus. Let's get on with the plowing. That's what we're talking about today. And I hope you take this really seriously.